This particular event is a bit of a happy accident. When Brian Wolf, our program director, contacted Olga at the Ukrainian American Archives Museum, he went to go meet her and was introduced to a new instrument, new to us. She connected us with Nick and Myrosia. Myrosia, as it turns out, is the mother of a very old friend of mine, Myrosia Stefaniuk, who not only did the design for our program today, but was instrumental as a consultant in the early days of Passenger, when it was me and a nonprofit badge and a vehicle helping touring musicians get to 12-step meetings, and that was in 2016. So this is kind of a family affair to us, which is why I wanted to say a few welcoming words. As an organization that's based on supporting people's recovery from substance use disorder, we have to look at general well-being in order to assist people in long-term recovery. Part of that process is enrichment, and we hope you'll find that here today. As people in recovery, it is also crucial for us to get out of our heads and recognize the bigger issues the world is facing. Firstly, understanding the suffering that people are enduring elsewhere in order to right-size our problems, but also to express gratitude for what we do have. Secondly, to rejoin the human race and feel connected again. A big part of that process here in Hamtramck is making everyone feel welcome and celebrating the many cultures that exist here. As Nikola Horbal himself says, culture is life, not the depletion of culture. Joy comes from enlightenment, not scrutiny. So we celebrate his life and work here today by welcoming Nick Deychakiwsky and Myrosia. And Myrosia, also thanks to Marta for helping me with all that. And Myrosia Stefaniuk to discuss the Ukrainian Bandura instrument and perform some music and poetry based on Nikola Horbal's Details of the Hourglass, poems and songs from the Gulag.
Hi, I'm glad there's not too many of us, so we can have this kind of nice intimate atmosphere. And while I know this is not a 12-step meeting, for those of you who care, please join me in the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you. And one of the things I have to accept that I cannot change is that I left my little bag of goodies back in Brighton where I live, which has my fingernails on them and my tuning key. So luckily, I think the instruments that I will play and the ones that I will play are pretty much in tune, and I could make it with the nails I have, but apologies for that. You will not be hearing some virtuosic playing from me today, but you will get a sense of what this instrument is about and what it's like. So let me go back in history a little bit. I want to take you on a slight journey there, okay? The precursor to Bandura, B-A-N-D-U-R-A, was called a kobza, K-O-B-Z-A. All right? And a kobza was around in Ukrainian history and lore since even as early as the perhaps 15th century. Right? And somewhere the name got to be different, and often they're interchangeable even. And sometimes you'll hear people say kobza and people say bandura. But the kobza was essentially a lute-like instrument initially, which just had strings right in the middle. And you've seen those kinds of instruments where you just pluck here and you would have frets on the neck. Okay? As it evolved into a bandura, somebody had the bright idea of starting to add treble strings on the side. And initially there were maybe 4 or 5, then you started getting to maybe the 17th century or so, and you started having more and more strings to the side. Okay? And the frets dropped off, and in fact, kobzars stopped pressing strings to raise the tone like you would have on any other kind of instrument of that sort, and it became something like this. Now, it is one that this is called an old world bandura. It's a recreation of the kind that you would meet in the probably starting from, in the 18th, 19th centuries, right? And so I never learned to play on it, but it sounds very like, if you think of bard-like, minstrel-like, and that was the role of what were called the kobzari, because basically it was a minstrel instrument. And I want to tell you a little bit about who these people were who would go about and play this kobza or bandura. They were kobzars or kobzari, that's the plural in Ukrainian. They would go about, as minstrels would often do, or bards, and play various kinds of, I'll get into the repertoire in a second, but they were wandering and they would tell stories, essentially. They would tell about what's going on, stories that described the situation going on amongst the people, right? So it's interesting that in Ukrainian kind of national consciousness, somebody who plays a kobza and who is a kobzar is considered to be more than just an entertainer, but in effect somebody who was a truth sayer, somebody who would speak the truth, would speak to the things that are important for the people. So, and the repertoire of these kobzars was a few types. One was often either religious songs or songs that would give some kind of moral lesson to them, okay? And then there were other types of repertoire. I'll get into them a little bit later. But because of that, I would like to start with and play a piece for you that is essentially that was done by Kobzari, that is a religious song. It's called Through the Wide Field, and quick translation is Through the Wide Field there went the Blessed Virgin Mary, and through the deep sea. Then he gets into how her son was crucified and she was standing and crying over the fact that he was suffering, and toward the end it just says that we all praise you. So just to give you a sense of, that was one type of repertoire of the kobzars. Okay?
Через поле широкеє, та через море глибокеє. Туди йшла пречистая, та пречистая Божа Мати. Де Христа взяли, на хрест розп'яли, воздяни руки прибивали. Ой, сину мій, Спасителю, та терпиш ти муки великі. Славимо тебе, Сине Божий, та твоя ласка нам поможе, та твоя ласка нам поможе.
Another type of repertoire that was very common for Kobzari was an epic ballad called a Duma. Duma, which roughly translated you could say is it's thought, but it's also just somebody help me out. How would you translate Duma? Yeah, well, we call it an epic.
Epic.
Yeah. And so there, often the Kobzari would be telling stories of, say, a battle that happened or some historical event, but also some dume were meant to provide a morale in the story. Now, I'm gonna play some segments of one, but only segments because the whole thing lasts 9 minutes and it's gonna be all in Ukrainian. And it's strophic, so it would get pretty boring. But I want to give you a couple segments of it, and let me tell you what it's about. It's called the Duma, about a widow and her 3 sons. And basically, the widow raises her 3 sons, and as they grow up, they become haughty, and they marry, and they want to have a good time, and they throw their mother out of the house. And at some point, she's blinded by her tears. She's leaving the house. The middle son even starts mocking her, making fun of her, and saying, "Oh, brothers, look, our mother's staggering. She must be drunk, right?" And the mother goes on to say, "Look, everything I've done for you. I've raised you. I've done what I could. I kept you out of being sold into slavery," which, you know, these are times from way back, and she actually says, "So I wish you 3 ill fates." Okay, and I'll tell the story a little bit more. I'll just play a little bit and tell you what happens after that. But it gives you a sense of how was it that Kobzari would what they would tell and what it sounds like.
Як на славній Україні, та й у городі Крилові, там жила стара бідна удова, вона мала 3 синів, як 3 ясних соколів. З малих літ до великого зросту кохала, годувала, діток своїх доглядала, собі на старість супокою дожидала. А як стали ті сини підростати, то стали вони до себе молоде подружжя приймати, то стали вони свою неньку стареньку з двору, з хати виганяти. Старший син каже: "Мати наша нене, іди геть від мене, бо будуть гості у мене, а ти, стара, тут будеш кашляти й стогнати, і моїм гостям веселитись заважати". Ой, тільки теє мати зачувала, гіркими дрібними сльозами обливалась, до діток своїх словами промовляла. Ой, сини, сини мої, діти молоді, скільки з вами літ горювала, пучками та ручками хліба солі заробляла, та й вас годувала, у найми не пускала, чужим рукам на потирання не давала. Тепер же, що я від вас діждала.
And she goes on to wish 3 ill fates that the bread wouldn't grow in the field, that people would stop knowing them, and that they wouldn't have happiness in their homes. And later, a neighbor finds the old mother, picks her up, and says, come, live with us. You'll make us good fortune in our home. And in this kind of archaic form says, you will use bread and salt with us. Another way of saying, we'll feed you. You will use bread and salt with us. So the mother lives at the neighbor's, and over time, the 3 ill fates befall the sons. Right? And finally, they come to their senses and they get together. And as they get together, they're making a lot of noise and sound. And then, as I'll tell you what happens and then play it. The middle brother says, "My brothers, until such time as we honor our mother, we had happiness, and we had good fortune for ourselves. So let's go to the neighbor's yard and cry and beg our mother to come back to us, and then we will have good fortune." And then the Duma ends in a typical Duma fashion, which wishes everyone who's listening health and happiness in many years, peace and health in many years. And we don't know if the mother ever went back. But the important point is we do know that the sons realized the error of their ways, and that they realized what they needed to do. So,
тож не діброла зашуміла, як 3 брати плаченьки на своєму подвір'ї загомоніли. Гей, гей, середущий брат каже: браття мої милі, доки ми свою неньку кохали та поважали, доти ми щастя і долю собі мали. Ой, ходімо ж, браття, в чужий двір, та припадемо матірі до ніг, будемо плакати й ридати, до себе жити завертати. Буде вона нас на все добре наставляти, будемо ми знову щастя і долі собі мати. А вам всім слухаючим головам пошли вам, Боже, мир та здрав'я на многі літа.
What I like about this piece of music is I know several Dumas, but this is the only one that I learned in the old traditional way that it was meant to happen, orally. So my teacher said, here are the chords, here's the basic things of the harmony, here's a little bit of melody, and repeat the text after me. Repeat the text after me. And you'll notice its form is not just sung melody, there's a lot of recitation involved, right? And that was part of the way that these Dumas would have, through recitation. Now, you'll notice there are different instruments being played here, and I want to tell a little bit about them, just to say that, we had this, and then it kind of morphed into even more strings, okay? Now, because this one is cracked, we don't tune it. It's Olya's father built it, and I actually tried tuning it once, and I got slapped down by a guy who builds banduras and says, no, it's, you better not tune it, it'll keep going. So it's not tuned, but just to illustrate what happened here is you start having even more strings, right? And then, later on, we had a new style come up that we call a Chernihiv bandura. And it's called Chernihiv because there used to be a factory in Ukraine that starting in about the, I think, 1950s would build and mass produce a lot of them, okay? This instrument is fully chromatic. So you probably can't tell, but yeah, I don't think you'd see it, but the strings actually crisscross. So for those of you who know a bit about music, it is actually tuned like a piano, like a keyboard, except for these strings here. These are just bass strings, but these are tuned like a piano. And what happens is the strings crisscross, right? Like that. So if you're on this part of the instrument, you get a regular scale. If you're on this part of the instrument, it sounds like the black keys on the piano, right? So in essence, if you want to play on your white keys, you're playing here, and if you want to play your black keys, you move up here. Sort of like on a piano, those you can envision, you just move your fingers a little further in to get the black keys. The problem is getting those black keys on a piano, keys are wider, first of all, right? And easy move, they're a lot easier to get at than on this instrument. Here, if you're playing and you want to get to your black keys, you have to move up and then back down, and the spacing is very tight. So this instrument, it's actually tuned in G major for those who know that, not in C major, so F sharp is like a white key, but that's neither here nor there. But anyway, in case anybody was curious and knows that, but and understands that. But it suffice it to say that led to the dilemma of what happens when we want to have some more music where we want to change keys and the like, and it gets quite difficult. So they actually developed a different style of this instrument which has levers on top where you could flip one lever and it'll tune several notes along an octave and put the whole bandura into a different key. A different lever will give you a different key. But back in the 1940s, another guy's name Honcharenko, in fact, I won't get into, I won't go down that rabbit hole, but he did a lot for bandura and ended up two brothers, Petro and Alexander, living here in Detroit. And they, even though they made this basic kind of construction of this instrument back in, starting in the 1940s, right? But they developed them a lot here, and they taught a lot of others to make banduras. And I think Olya's father also worked together with them, and there were other ones. This, you'll notice a couple things here. One I wanted to say is this bandura we actually call a Poltava instrument. Poltava is a city in central Ukraine because people from Poltava in the early 20th century would play on ones like these. And you may notice that I hold it like this, right? Part of the reason is because you can use your left hand to play up here, okay? And people do. It's a style of playing that I've never mastered. I can do a few things on it, but not now because I forgot my nails. So it won't sound good. But suffice to say that you can use both hands in all parts of the instrument, okay? That's one advantage to it. Another, if you compare it, when I play this one, and this is the proper form to play this one, you hold it, you know, perpendicular to your body, and you play like this. And because the pegs are up here and your so-called black keys are up here, you really can't do much to use your left hand on this part of the instrument. Sometimes you see banduras pick a note here and there, and they'll throw their hand over it, but it's quite awkward, okay? So, I'll tell you the other reason, and I learned how to play on one of these, because there weren't that many of the other ones available when I was growing up. I started playing when I was 12. But why I like this one is because it's right next to my heart. I mean, as simple like that. It's also more iconic. If the Kobzari, right, playing this kind of thing, and you have like images and paintings, sometimes or drawings of Kobzari from earlier centuries, they would be holding the instrument like this, right? And so it's, to my mind, it's also more intimately related to the past. Because the Bandura often gets referred to as the soul of the Ukrainian nation. In fact, there was a Ukrainian poet, Solena Chilka, who had one time famously said, if you want to destroy the soul of Ukrainian people, gather up all their banduras, put them on a pile and burn them, right? And it's because of this role of being the carriers of the messages and the truth of the people through religious songs, through Dume, through historical songs. If I have time, I'll play one, and then we have to move on to the next part of the program. And for that, they were often oppressed by, whether it be the Russian Empire primarily, because they were in the part of Ukraine that was more under the Russian Empire. Bandura wasn't really in the parts that were under the Polish Empire later on. But so because they were often oppressed because of that. There was even a famous incident in 1933 where they were gathered supposedly for a big conference and taken outside of the city of Kharkiv and killed a large number of them. One thing I forgot to say earlier is that often in the Ukrainian lore, they were often blind. There were, one reason is that was historically shown that often one of the things that the Turks, because there used to be battles with the Turks and the Cossacks in Ukraine in the 16th, 17th, even up to 18th centuries, one of the Turks' way to keep men from ever fighting again was to burn their eyes out, right? So lots of times the Cossack who couldn't be a warrior anymore, one of the things he could do is play a musical instrument and be blind. Later on, the Kobzars formed their own guilds, and they would often bring blind people, not exclusively, but often it was blind people that were into the guilds, and they'd go around and essentially be bucksters and make a livelihood that way. They would play bandura. They would also make rope, because rope was another thing you could do without having eyesight, right? So those guilds would end up getting a lot of people who were blind Kobzars. I wear glasses and I kind of need them to play, so but that's a little bit of the history and tradition. Let me play one quick historical song. It's called 1791. And what happened in 1791 was the Empress Catherine the Great had put out an edict to destroy the last big main fortress of the Zaporozhian Cossacks, the ones that were in central Ukraine, and they were exiled to the Kuban region, which is now under Russia. So anyway, this is about how that process happened. It's interesting that when the song starts out, it says in 1791, a edict came out from that empress. We wouldn't even name her. From that empress, from the city of Petersburg, right? And then it goes on to say that two of the Cossack leaders said, okay, we're having to leave beyond the Kuban River, and they talked to the barracks that are left behind and say, be well without us, but without us here you'll fall apart. So it's it goes along with something like 80% of Ukrainian history, folk songs which are in the minor key and tend to be sad. Okay.
So what are you doing now?
1791.
No, but what are you doing?
Oh, I'm flipping into C minor because that's a more convenient key for me to sing this song in. Sorry. So that's part of the reason why it's also useful to have different keys, is, you know, to set it up more easily under what key you want to sing a song. Because I'll say one quick thing is that in traditionally Bandura was an accompanying instrument. It's not to say that there aren't some really fantastic virtuoso and some instrumental pieces, and it acts as its own as an instrument, but often it is an accompaniment to singing.
В 1791 року гей, вийшов указ від тої цариці з Петербурга города. А що пан Чепига та пан Головатий, зібравши се військо запорізьке, гей, відступали аж за Кубань річку, на вічне єврем'я все. Бувайте здорова, Дніпріка мутная, підем в Кубань чистої напиться. Бувайте здорові, ви курені наші, тут вам без нас розвали. Бувайте здорові, ви курені наші, тут вам без нас розвали.
Thank you. Be happy to answer any more things about the instrument you'd like, but I think let's move to the next section of our program, if that's okay. Thank you.
What we do, if you'd like to get up for a moment and stretch, that's fine too, because I know it's a lot of sitting to do. So, okay. Nikola didn't give you a whole lot of history of Ukraine. I thought he was going to, but that's all
Oh, I'm
right.
sorry.
That's okay. Let me just say that for centuries, Russia has not only tried to dominate, but actually annihilate the Ukrainian nation. Okay? During the Russian Empire, it was by the Tsars, then by the Soviets, and currently by Putin's thugs. All right? But the world knows about what is happening in Ukraine. Now, in more recent history, and this was during my youth, during our lifetime, all right, in the 1960s and the 70s, and that's how I got involved in this. In Ukraine, there was a whole new wave of arrests and repressions as the Soviet governments tried to crack down on the Ukrainian liberation movement again. This time, the movement was spearheaded by young artists, musicians, writers, intellectuals. They were called the Shestidesiatniki, the dissidents of the 60s, right? Thousands of them who spoke out against the Soviet repression and the systematic destruction of Ukrainian culture and language and literature. They were convicted in close trials, arrested, and sent into the Soviet penal camps in the Gulag. And such was the fate of the poet that we're going to be introducing to you today, Nikola Horbal. Nikola Horbal was charged with anti-Soviet aggression and propaganda. This was usually the article for which they were arrested. He was arrested for his poetry, for his cultural activism, for his defense of human rights, and he was sentenced and re-arrested 3 times for a total of 16 years in the Soviet Gulag. 16 years. Details of the Hourglass, his book, all right, was a collection of poetry that he wrote while he was imprisoned. Okay, he calls it his poetic reflections about the brutal reality of his world there. Okay, for him, the word became a very powerful instrument for breaking through the prison walls. We've posted some at the center was very kind to post a lot of photographs there of what some of those two camps in which he was arrested, Perm 35 and 36, was known as the death zone. And he was there until he was released in 1988 during Perestroika. Nikola, if he has time afterwards, happened to be able to see what those camps looked like after they were turned into a museum by the Soviets. So he'll be able to tell you a little bit about them. Like I said, for Nikola Horbal, the word became the powerful weapon for breaking through prison walls. So, details of the Hourglass, poetry from the Gulag. I should mention that most of the poems we'll be reading will be in translation in English. Nick will read a few in Ukrainian, and you can follow them in the order in which they appear. They're right in your program books, in Ukrainian and in English. I think there are 4 of them, so you can follow this if you would like. All right. In the bleak Siberian landscape, where beyond barbed wire, there is no visible demarcation between horizon and sky, between night and day, between reality and nightmare. For Nikola Horbal, there is only the word.
When there was no day and there was no night, because nothing existed yet. No one cursed another, no one prayed to anyone, because nothing had been born yet. There was only the word, naked, completely naked.
The word, bared to its essence, exposes the inner man. It is the medium for introspection. It is the vehicle for expression. It is the creative framework for the soul. It is Nikola Horbal's key to the meaning of existence, his proclamation to truth and beauty and faith, and ultimately, it is his redemption from isolation, alienation, darkness, and despair. Amidst barren prison surroundings, completely devoid of warmth, light, and human touch, the poet searches for a spark, an image, a memory that will illuminate the moment, but he does not find them in the external world.
Судужно, молив хоч іскру ласки, вимолив, втішився, роздумав, заходився і грівся коло багаття, розпаленого фантазією. Не набагато вистачило, вдавання не дозволило любості підкинути в пригаслу ватру хоч пару тихих, теплих слів. Oppressed, I implored at least a spark of mercy. Granted, I rejoiced, stoked it, hustled about, and warmed myself around the fire inflamed by fantasy. It did not last for long. Pretense did not allow delight to feed the dying embers with even a few quiet, warming words.
The poet yearns for these warming words with a firm belief in their existence. One needs only to find the key.
It seems it wouldn't be so sad if one could only reach the hiding place of those wise words that provide balance.
But the joys are few, and peace is distributed only in tiny, skimpy doses.
She flew in for a moment, leaving a rush of wings, an imprint of freedom. She awakened a quivering desire to live, but not for long. After a lightning flash, the night is darker.
Although common themes in Horbal's poems are loneliness, sadness, and helplessness in the midst of evil, his internal battle is not permeated with anger or aggression. Instead, it's a quiet but stubborn rebellion, and a search for beauty in small, saving graces in his harsh surroundings. Often, these are found in nature, and he expresses them with a light touch of humor.
When? When? How should I know when? Just yesterday, I distributed colors to the flowers, and there were so many tears. Violets took theirs, violet, and the asters, such greed, would have taken it all if they could. The peony paled, insisted on pink. And what should I give the roses? Blue or what? What is there to say? You can't please everyone.
Inevitably, such moments are short-lived and often tinted with sadness and skepticism.
Glass slivers of shattered illusions in the kaleidoscope of time formed capricious patterns. Poetry. Perhaps this toy must be smashed as well.
Horbal's poems are short, many only a few lines in length, yet each one is dense and layered with metaphor and meaning, rich in harmony and overtones. Sometimes parallel images are paired side by side. Music with peace, death with sadness, memories with happiness. At other times, they are in direct opposition, days and nights, suffering and hope, deceit and truth, reality and fantasy. Most startling and arresting are incongruous images juxtaposed, the lyrical with the raw pain, the tender with the frightening, the innocent with the brutal.
Unshaved heads, hair no longer rises from fear. The bloodied sun struggled uphill toward dawn. Amber thickens with time after drowning the ant. A butterfly lands on the white carcass of a dead calf. They took turns carrying him the way they carry little boys on their backs, only this one was over 50 and had both legs missing.
Yet Horbal insists he is not a poet. The KGB made me a poet, he says. He refers to his works as poetic reflections written to chronicle the horrors of the Soviet totalitarian regime. His words are dedicated to the thousands that risked their freedom and lives to break the Iron Curtain. One underlying element of Horbal's confinement is the vastness of the universe, pitted against the crushing walls of his prison cell.
The cell is narrow. Arms outspread, I lean against the walls and convince myself that I don't need a bigger one. I don't plan to dance here. I try to convince myself. And why do I feel the walls are closing in, squeezing together like skis?
In the immense silence of isolation, Horbal's word is pointed inward as he slips into infinite space of the universe where eternities twirl their shimmering dance of infinity.
Час занурився в пітьму, лиш чути, як космос скрипить трибами галактик, мов старезний млин. Та вузлик нервів з острахом дивиться на вкриту космічним порохом павутинку ілюзій. Урветься? Time burrowed itself in darkness, only the cosmos was heard, creaking galactic cogwheels like an ancient mill. A bundle of nerves fearfully gazes at a web of illusions covered with cosmic dust. Will it rip?
While in the cosmos there is greatness and power in eternal motion, in his prison cell there is only the painful reality of his own precarious state. The question continually arises: what next? How to survive? How to traverse the road between despair and hope? And how to transform raw pain and anguish into refinement of one's soul when surrounded by lies, doubts, injustice, and emptiness. At night, when the exhausted watchman of consciousness lets down its guard and the barriers between the real and imagined are removed, dreams become nightmares of terror and fear with no option for escape.
Cold sweat splattered on a pile of hot clay because this is your body. I screamed at the edge of dream and reality and ran along the ledge of love and hate, insanity and insight, falling and flying, life and death. Along margins thin as blades, I ran from myself.
Another element in the poems is time. Horbal chose the book's title, Details of an Hourglass, because in prison you are so keenly aware of time. Every day in the cell is identical, gray like the sand grains, no visual or audio stimulation from the outside, just the same thing day after day, one grain after another.
Sand and sand, no end, no boundary. But all you need is 2 handfuls for an hourglass, because time is the best judge. Now this desert will trickle in a fine stream through my carotid artery. And when the last grain of sand falls, they will invert the desert again.
Faith dealt Horbal a very bitter journey. He is first and foremost a musician. Separated from his beloved profession, he listens to every nuance, every vibration of every living thing, and senses their harmonies. Even within prison walls, he composes poems and songs and invites us to hear that which is inaudible. The Autumn Song was written in 1973 in the Perm prison camp. It was inspired by a letter from a friend who described the strange atmosphere in Lviv, a city in western Ukraine that was spiritually devastated by the arrests of the dissidents in 1972. It's a nostalgic song, filled with longing, images of migrating geese, autumn flowers, falling leaves, and memories of freedom. The singer plays a Jew's harp and repeats the refrain, "Ah, it is so quiet, so lonely without words." The Autumn Song.
Над містом гуси проспівали ту, а вітрові регоче з голих днів, лиш спомин волі десь на дримбі грає, і тихо так, спокійно так, без слів. І тихо так, самотньо так, без слів. І я бим цілий день на дримбі грала мелодії із вересневих днів. Осінні квіти ждуть своє незнане, спокійно так, самотньо так, без слів. Спокійно так, самотньо так, без слів. І ще бим цілий день на дримбі грала ті думи, що підслухала в гаї. Прощальний танець кружить жовте листя, спокійно так, самотньо так, без слів. Спокійно так, самотньо так, без слів.
I should add at this point that Nikola Horbal wrote the words and composed the music, but Nick Deychakiwsky arranged them for the Bandura chorus. The composer mourns the absence of music in his barren surroundings, but he does so without bitterness.
I whittled bits of music out of a willow twig, hewed out 2 poems with a mountain axe. They wither and dry, let them. I'll warm my feet in the ashes.
It is no surprise that tone, timbre, dynamics, rhythm, tempo are ever-present elements in which Nikola dressed his naked word, until sound and sense are organically fused. Even silence is never empty. In the poem, about death, where sound left us without a word, forever, everything that is left behind sings the funeral dirge.
Так беззвучно відійшов день від нас. Назавжди. Скінчився. То поля свічкою у небу сахала тіні з'явиська, блукало ланом чиєсь голосіння, під цвинтарем осиротілий ранок хникав. Час містився, а навколо нікого. Лиш мокра ворона над тріснутим голосом нарекла долю, та ще хоч хтось досвідком заганяє цвях у дошку. Without a sound, day left us forever. Finished. A poplar taper cast shadow apparitions in the sky. Someone's lament meandered through the field. An orphaned mourning whimpered near the cemetery. Time shifted, but no one was around.
Only a wet crow's crackly voice begrudged fate. And before dawn, someone pounded a nail into a wooden board.
Ultimately, each individual must undergo his own life journey. And whether that road is, according to Nikola Horbal, a path of thorns embroidered with feathers, or blades of grass, or crosses of barbed wire, one must strive not to fall into nothingness, but maintain one's dignity even in the most difficult conditions.
In the corner behind the bathhouse, when you find a moment of solitude, you can hear how, accompanied by metal wires and fences, the forest sings Hail Mary.
For Horbal, the theme of the invincibility of spirit is crystallized into pure form saturated with deep spirituality. In horrific circumstances, he yearns for something higher, something more noble, and he never loses dignity or faith. He survived the hell of Soviet prisons and concentration camps and was not broken. Only my body was imprisoned, he says, not my spirit. He describes his reality as a free spiritual journey.
I am grateful to the fate that led me to Mordovia, the Urals, and Siberia, where I met the finest Ukrainians. It was there that I was rid of the most miserable of emotions, fear. I feel that it was there that I became truly human. Why should I be afraid? The evil empire will collapse. It will fall apart like all others before it, because such is the law of eternity. Thank you, God, for this law. So why should I be afraid?
A humble man, possessing great courage, dignity, and faith in others and in God, Horbal appears unaware of his own gift, the ability to capture with a few sparse lines the essence of man's existence. Compressed, without superfluous dressing, his poetry is illuminated from within. It radiates spirituality and strength, a keen awareness of truth and beauty, and a stalwart faith in the goodness of God and the grace of God and the goodness of man.
Such an immense amount of warmth only you can bestow, Almighty, because your bounty has no end. I raise my face to you and fold my palms, humbled by the radiance of your countenance. Help me release the burden of doubts so that joyfully I could come to you.
It has been said that the characteristic of a truly great poet is that his works contain a condensed history of the nation, its past and even its future. In that context, Horbal's miniatures capitalize the history of Ukraine in centuries past and the moral indignation of its contemporary status today. The Soviet Union has collapsed, but Russia's savage military aggression and genocide in Ukraine continue. As Ukraine defends its independence and sovereignty, Horbal's words are as poignant today as they were decades ago. Truly, they are an undisputable testament that you can imprison the body, but not the spirit. The next song, "The Field is Black," written in 1973 in the Ural concentration camp. Tragically, it still portrays Ukraine today. It is voiced by a young daughter who awaits her father to return from the field. She has decked the house with flowers, built and prepared a wonderful meal, and waits for a long, long time, and then finally carries the meal into the field. But the field is black, sown with sorrow and the screech of blackbirds. The field is black.
хатку замітала, квітям прикрашала, з поля прийде татко, доня татка ждала. А поле те чорне засіяне жалем, на тім чорнім полі вороня кричало. На тім чорнім полі вороня кричало. В рушник зав'язала полудень для тата, треба йти у поле, доки можна ждати. А поле те чорне засіяне жалем, на тім чорнім полі вороня кричало. На тім полі чорнім вороня кричало. Зняла рученята, чорних птахів гонить, десь не видно тата. Обід захолоне. А поле те чорне засіяне жалем, на тім чорнім полі вороня кричали. На тім чорнім полі вороня кричало.
We will close with a poem from a section called Lidorozhnya Kaplichka, Roadside Chapel. It's the section in the book dedicated to the memory of Nikola Horbal's fellow brothers who died in imprisonment.
Коли зберем плачі усі, всі голосіння твої, Україно, твій стогін і розпач твій, твої молитви за всіх часів твоєї страсної дороги по всій землі. І як не розірветься серце від тягаря цього, повернемось. When we gather all the tears, all your laments, O Ukraine, your wailing and your despair, your prayers from all the times, your way of the cross throughout the land, and if the heart does not break from the weight of this burden, we will return.
Very dark, somber notes to end on, so let's end with a little bit of music.
Okay, but the music is going to be a little bit in the vein. Uh-oh. It's called The Grave Mound in the Field.
Oh, this is the happy song.
This is the, I didn't say it would be happy, but it's filled with a particular meaning. I'm just gonna play it rather than sing it as well. And it just talks about the wind speaking to the grave mound. A grave mound in the field was speaking with the wind and says, "Wind, please blow over me so that the grass grows green." So I'll leave you with that image of the wind blowing over the mound, over the field, so that the grass grows, and the idea that grass will grow no matter what sorrow happened before.
Life
We-
will return, yes.
Life will return. Chris, giving us the opportunity. Happy to stay, answer any questions about the Bandura instruments, Ukraine's history, Nikola Horbal, whatever.
We'd like to thank both of you very much for your gifts and your insights and your effort. It was wonderful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And if anyone would like, we do have a few codes there on the wall where the Gulag pictures are. There's